And our meeting tonight is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Shahidat from Maryland, go ahead.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Amanda, first of all, for those lovely readings tonight. I appreciate the fact that I can follow along to the readings online and find the citations available so I can read them later on if need be. This past Monday, shortly after I returned home from work, I received a text message telling me that a dear family member was in the emergency room after a sky-high blood pressure reading earlier in the day at a doctor's appointment. I called my practitioner and left a message asking for some prayerful support before heading to the emergency room. While at the hospital, the practitioner called back and reminded me to have no fear and that life was spiritual and not in matter. We were at the hospital for 4 hours and finally left when it became clear that she was not going to be seen that evening. The next morning, I dropped her off at the emergency room again, and a little while later, I received a text that a preliminary blood pressure reading prior to seeing a doctor had already shown an almost 40-point drop. I quickly emailed this favorable progress to the practitioner, asking her to continue her work. Shortly afterwards, I received another text that my family member had actually seen a doctor who proclaimed that she was fine and released her to go home. I am very grateful to God for this church and for our practitioners that are always prepared to assist with prayerful support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Luann from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. I am so grateful to God for making it possible for me to go to our church this past weekend. It was a wonderful opportunity for growth and understanding. Every time I go there, I am met with so much love and compassion. In the past, it was always difficult for me to trust this type of experience. I had built up such a wall of skepticism over the years to protect myself from disappointment that I had not even noticed that that aspect of my life had been so fully healed. I recall when I first came into science how timid and on guard I was. But through the work of my practitioner and all the lessons taught here, I have become confident that God's promises are kept. I can trust that He is always present and always able. His love is infinite and compassionately shines throughout the church. Right before I made the trip, I was met with a great deal of opposition, which included a broke furnace, untimely work schedule, and bad weather. But my practitioner instilled in me that the Christ would go before me and clear the way, and that a right idea cannot be stopped. Everything that was trying to impose on this work for God was very quickly silenced. I am so grateful for her prayerful work. What a wonderful blessing it is to be a part of something so honest and pure. I am so deeply grateful to Mrs. Eddy, Christ Jesus, and my practitioner for all their healing work, for showing me the way, and filling my heart with a deep love for God. Thank you.
Thank you. Candy from Wisconsin, go ahead.
Thank you. Tonight, I would like to express my gratitude for the church website. Often, when cooking, driving, or walking, I am listening to the song, the weekly lesson sermon, or the articles posted on the site. One of my favorite songs is Fear Not My Child. The song refrain ends, I know how to care for what belongs to me. This winter has been very wicked in Wisconsin. One night in January, the temperature was below zero with very gusty winds. I live in the country, and the wind often blows drifts across the road. As I entered the north entrance of my road, I got stuck in what had looked like an extremely small drift. Thoughts of fear and blame tried to crowd in, but I knew God was taking care of me. I asked Him what to do, and the thought came back to back up. At first, I tried to ignore it because there was a snowy drift on one side, and I could see nothing if I was backing up. But God was holding my hands, and I listened. Soon I was able to turn around. In a few minutes, I was home. God does indeed know how to care for you. Thank you for Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy, this church and my practitioner, for teaching me how to trust God. Good night.
Thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
Last Saturday morning, I woke up very groggy with a strange, dull headache. Sometimes these headaches seem to come at random times and last 24 hours. I got up and thought I would spend the time studying and skip the Bible study that was to take place that morning. But I got the strong thought that I needed to go forward with the Bible study, and so I started getting ready for it by researching the questions, and I became engrossed in doing so. The Bible study topic was the 10 Commandments, and while attending, there were so many helpful ideas that were expressed about obeying God and the fact that by living each of the commandments, for they each have a purpose, we are living under God's laws, the laws of the universe, and are kept safe, secure, happy, with a purpose. I was very grateful during this study to get a better sense of the importance of obeying God, and especially the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. At some point during the hour, I realized the headache had completely disappeared, and I was feeling very relaxed and free. And thank you so much, Amanda, for the very powerful reading.
Thank you. Day from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm grateful for what I've learned, and I'm still learning in this church about the power of prayer. Some challenges I've experienced seem so real and sometimes so severe that they carry the suggestion that it would be impossible for me to overcome them. The Bible instructs us to pray without ceasing. And learning to do so is proving to me over and over that there is no ill, no wrong, no challenge, and no fear that can't be completely overcome. Because like tonight's readings say, truth, life, and love always triumph. I'm most grateful to know that the same prayer that rights every wrong in my own experience will eventually correct all that seems to be wrong in the world. This gives me the motivation needed to continue to work for the world. And I'm thankful to all of those who have been working this way for so many years. Thank you, Amanda, for tonight's readings, and thank you for all the testimonies given so far. Thank you many times for all the work that continues to go on in this church that's strengthening me and the rest of the world. I'm very grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm so grateful to Plainfield for all that I'm learning in my understanding of Christian Science and applying it practically in my daily life. As it is true in our healings, so it's true in our daily living, the importance of persistence. For almost 2 weeks, I had great difficulty in finding the right party or person to clarify a tax statement we received that needed a response. Today, I made more calls and was so grateful to receive the exact information needed. I'm so grateful to God who always supplies our needs and for all the understanding I'm receiving here. Thank you for tonight's reading, and I'm very happy to be here this evening.
Thank you. Barbara or Ken from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hello. It seems that I'm especially indebted to Carol tonight. First, for her testimony last week about not getting too engrossed in anything. This is such a helpful idea. I'm also grateful for something I heard on Carol's recording of addresses by Martha Wilcox today. Quote, doctors do not make materia medica, mortal mind is the culprit. Doctors have the same mind as we have, the divine mind. And that's the end of the quote. This is so helpful to me in thinking rightly about the medical community. So thank you, Carol, and thanks everyone involved in working to get Plainfield's gifts available to so much of our world. And thanks everybody for their testimonies tonight. Good night.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I'm very grateful for Christian Science and for this church. I came to Plainfield at the lowest point of my life, and I was certain there was no place for me anywhere and no purpose to my life. The only thing I was certain of was that my own understanding led me all the way down, and on my own I could not get back up. I felt when I got here that this was my final opportunity, my last second chance, so to speak. Because of that, I hung on to the teachings here and the work as though they were life preservers, and they definitely are. Yet, over time, I've realized I don't need to desperately cling to my purpose or the understanding I am gaining. I don't need to worry about losing my purpose any more than my purpose would need to worry about losing me. So tonight, I would like to say how grateful I am to this church and to my practitioner for helping me to learn about Christian Science, to realize that I have a place and a purpose in God's reality, and finally to let the fear go so I can wake each day and do what I feel I am called to do without worrying about tomorrow. What a healing it is to have this peace each day. It is such a blessing. Thank you. And now I have a testimony from Diana.
Hello, this is Diana from Berlin and Vienna. I'm in Berlin now, and I would like to express my gratitude for a quote from the Blue Book that Mary gave us in the round table on Sunday. The quote is, "Father, there is nothing between thee and this little child." Florence commented that this truth is relevant for protecting children, but also for healing all relationships. At the moment, I am working with young children, teaching them music, and I take this responsibility very seriously. I am using the time I have with these children to expose them to beautiful music that will enrich their lives. And the little ones are so happy and so grateful for this. The older ones, however, have fought me at every turn, wanting to sing and hear music that I don't think children should be exposed to at all. But even they have shifted in a positive direction. I have been working at the school for 1.5 years, and I have been blessing the school every day. I am very grateful to have seen an enormous improvement in the behavior of the children, the expectations of the teachers, the curriculum, the education, and even the environment, and it keeps getting better. I am now going to work with this truth that there is nothing between God and each child, not only for the children I work with, but for all children. And I am also going to work with this truth in hopes that it will help me heal difficult relationships. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeff.
Before coming to Plainfield, I did a lot of kneeling in churches and heard people say, "God's will, not mine, be done." When asked people whose spiritual mindedness I admired, they used to say, "Well, pray for knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out." I took their advice and prayed for knowledge of God's will. I never got any answer except maybe to try to follow in Jesus' footsteps. But I was lost and in a really dark place, unable to find the light. Then, one day I went looking for a Christian Science church listed in Westfield, and it wasn't there. Across the street at the police station, I asked about it, and the officer said that the church had been demolished to make way for a new YMCA. Looking on the internet, the officer said there were 2 other Christian Science churches in my northern New Jersey area, one in Summit and the other in Plainfield. I chose Plainfield, and am I glad I did. After they welcomed me into the Plainfield church family, I became a member. And it wasn't long before I heard the words originally spoken by Jesus, "God's will be done, not mine." So I prayed again, what's God's will for me? Coming to Plainfield certainly felt like God, or G-O-D, leading me in a good, orderly direction. As I sat at Plainfield Bible studies, roundtable discussions, and Sunday services, I learned to listen and listen to learn about Christian Science. From our textbook, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, and I also learned from my practitioner and the people here in the church. It wasn't long before my prayer, "What is God's will for me?" received an answer. For me, God's will for me is 1. Pray unceasingly, 2. Rejoice, and 3. Give thanks in all things. I used to think finding a parking spot was a matter of dumb luck, but I have learned that God can be found in life's everyday little things if we are looking at them through spiritual eyes. Thank you, Mary Baker Eddy and Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, for being God's answer to my prayers.
Thank you. Chardell.
Good evening. Thank you for those readings on faith. I would like to offer my gratitude this evening for our music and hymns. Thank you to Sammy, Laura, Jared, Craig, and Bruce for performing God Will Make a Way. I listened to it several times and felt comforted. We have been told to pray for ourselves, and one way for me to do this is to open the hymnal to hymns that I have marked and sometimes just search randomly. These bring peace and inspiration, a concept that I have been reminded of lately. Many hymns are poems, and on our website is a poem called Unbelief, which is a gem. It starts out, "There is no unbelief. Whoever plants a seed beneath the sod and waits to see it push away the clod, he trusts in God." Thank you all for providing this service tonight and all the prayers that support it. Good evening.
Thank you. Edith from California. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to express my gratitude this evening for all the wonderful things that I am still learning here in the Plainfield Church Christian Science. It's just been so wonderful. And just so many wonderful things are happening to me and my family. And I'm just so grateful. I feel I can identify with the last testimony as well. I am so grateful for the song, God Will Make a Way. It has helped me so much. It was great listening to it, and I'm so grateful for practitioner support. It's wonderful to feel that I can reach out and get advice, and it's just such a wonderful experience altogether. Last month, my job changed, and I'm dealing with less work and less wages. But I feel so much peace. It's just incredible. I'm not worried at all. I believe that God will make a way. And as I was listening to everybody's testimonies, I feel so grateful to be part of this community. And I appreciate everyone's testimonies and the reading and the music and everything that is provided. Thank you so much for keep encouraging us all to keep believing in God because He will make a way. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. I am most grateful for our classes, the round table. Each time I learn something new and unique, and they are all very meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie from Illinois, go ahead.
Hello. I'm very grateful for the readings this evening. As always, it was exactly the message that I needed to hear. I'm also grateful that God is blessing every and each aspect of my life. And the fact that I was reminded again tonight that through everything, perseverance will triumph and that God triumphs over all. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
Good evening. I'd like to express my gratitude for all I'm learning and the practitioner support that I get. Today I did a task at church and found that I had gained strength in my shoulders, arms, and back. I even asked if the equipment had changed, and it had not. When I first came to the church, I was finding a lack of strength impacting the work that I was able to do, or I had to cut back on things. Since then, I have been getting regular practitioner support, attending classes, and putting into practice daily what I have been learning. I see my strength regaining and endurance, and I know it's a direct result of this spiritual prayer and spiritual work. I'm very grateful, and thank you for the readings and service tonight.
Thank you. This is Bruce, and I'm especially thankful for the readings that Amanda gave tonight because it reminded me of something very fundamental that I learned here in the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent. And that is, you don't run away from things, you stand with God and face them and find a resolution. I was a great runner. I ran away from everything, so full of fear. When God brought me to this church, He resurrected my life. And I started learning about myself as God's child and the fundamental fact that God gave man dominion. And for that, I'm endlessly thankful for the teaching and help from a practitioner in this church over many years, because fear is something that is greatly lessened in my experience, and the willingness to face problems and things that come up and find a resolution for them, knowing that God does indeed provide an answer for each and every one, has been very helpful to me. And for this, I'm very thankful. Thank God. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda, for the beautiful and powerful readings tonight. Tonight, I'd like to express my gratitude for citation in the lesson this week. It says, to ascertain our progress, we must learn where our affections are placed and whom we acknowledge and obey as God. If divine love is becoming nearer, dearer, and more real to us, matter is then submitting to spirit.
The objects we pursue and the spirit we manifest reveal our standpoint and show what we are winning. This instruction has been very, very, very helpful because for a long time I would always check a claim to see if it's changing and to determine my progress by that. Later I found out that is not the right way, since to understand what God is and to know that that is what I am, that expression of and manifestation of is what proves my progress. That is why the instruction to turn from the false testimony, seek God, what He is, and identify with that, and obey Him as all in all. Doing this consistently does make clearer for us what we are, and in that clearer picture of our true being, we find no sign of the false claim. The more God is becoming all in all, the more every negative is becoming nothing. I am so grateful for this understanding because without Christian Science, first, I would always keep accepting and making real the false suggestions and come and then keep checking it. Is the claim gone? Is it improved? While doing that, making God less and less. If God is love, and He is, as we read in the Bible so many times in Science and Health, how can we find and understand this great love and at the same time find pain, bitterness, sin, anger, resentment, sorrow, regret, and any other negative in Him? Thank God for Christ Jesus, showing us that our Father, Mother God is all, that He is love, and Mrs. Eddy for explaining and emphasizing how important it is to obey that truth. For everyone's testimony, for the hymns, I'm just grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
Letters to read tonight. The first is a testimony from France. Today, I would like to give thanks to God for all the inspiration and supply He has provided me so far in my spiritual journey. For a few months after I got to know about Christian Science as an adult, I was studying Science and Health. In a few months' time, I had access to prose works and was also lucky enough that a church member from New Zealand provided us with an original copy of the Blue Book, which has since proved to be an invaluable storehouse of ideas supporting my study. Along the way, we found the Mary Baker Eddy Institute and the bookmark. Mary Baker Eddy Institute is a website. And the bookmark, most of you know what that is. I also found Arthur Curry's class instructions, which dissolved my problem with certain seemingly contradictory statements in Science and Health by explaining how Science and Health contains absolute and relative statements about the same question to meet each reader at his actual level of understanding. The works of John Dorley, the Morgans, and Alice Orgain showed how the Bible may be interpreted in science in an individual way while not losing anything from its essence, only truth unfolding, multiplying, and being expressed in human consciousness in manifold ways, and that's okay. To interpret a given Bible story or even the structure of Science and Health in different ways. After a few years, however, I seem to have still struggled with putting science in practice in many aspects of my life, and life seemed to be a constant struggle and difficulty. This was the time when I read Notes from a Class as taught by Laura Sargent. I found on the bookmark, and Laura Sargent, along with Martha Wilcox, was one of the closest workers in Mary Baker Eddy's home. I found it to state absolute Christian Science in a way that spoke to my heart, and there an immediate change took place in my consciousness. I simply could not put the book down. Then about a year and a half ago, I found your church's website. All the collected material is great, and there are so many articles of early workers that I had not had the chance to read before. I am especially grateful for Carol recording the Martha Wilcox material, as well as the Gilbert Carpenter's Mary Baker Eddy, Her Spiritual Footsteps, so clearly and beautifully. The latter, although at first hearing seems to be a material history of Mrs. Eddy's household, it holds great lessons about translating all things into spirit, as well as understanding the intent behind several of Mrs. Eddy's actions while building this cause. I am also very grateful for Gary Singletary for reading in the articles by Mary Baker Eddy. I think his rich and timeless tone is perfectly suitable to carry us back to the sitting room of Mary Baker Eddy, where those items in the compiled articles must have been first heard. I especially gleaned truthful ideas lately from the article entitled Place, attributed to Mrs. Eddy. Although I had known this article before, now I found it to address a completely new era of thought that has nothing to do strictly with place, home, or job, but suits my current need perfectly. I listened to it at least 20 times in these last 2 weeks. I found that God always provides us with the right inspiration according to our light, and that while science and health is our basis to understand our Bible better, all these literature highlight different facets of our true diamond science. Therefore, I am most grateful. Thank you for your great work in this church and for trying to collect and preserve for all of us the literature that's still available. And then this is from Texas. I love your website, and whenever I listen to any of the discussions, it is beautifully apparent how much you all love Christian Science and Mrs. Eddy and Jesus, and are very happy to say so. The comments are always uplifting and give me joy, which I've missed for a number of years. When we begin to follow Christian Science, it can be lonely at times, and it is nice to have a friend going in the same direction to share their inspirations and insights with us. And for this, I thank you all. Well, I thank everyone tonight for the beautiful testimonies, and thank you, Amanda, for those readings. I thought you read from Mrs. Eddy, miscellaneous writings, where she was speaking about Paul taking pleasure in necessities, for they tested and developed latent power. And that's so encouraging because the theme of this being about our triumph, how in science we always do triumph. We can await that triumph. But as we're going through some of our trials, we can rejoice that we are developing latent powers. As Florence said beautifully, we are learning more of God, more and more of God, and less of the era of this world. And in doing that, we do come upon great triumph. Such beautiful, beautiful thoughts, and I'm so grateful for it. I was mentioned tonight about Martha Wilcox and her book Addresses, and we sell that. And it's a wonderful book. And I remember for me it was quite a life changer. And she did work in Mrs. Eddy's home, and she was taught directly by Mrs. Eddy. And some time ago, I found in her article, War, on page 388, where Mrs. Wilcox writes, "In Christian Science, we understand that God made man and gave him presence and certainty and position. And man does not desire to get from somebody or some other nation, but draws from infinity. Now, at that time, I was struggling quite a bit with inferiority complex, I guess you'd call it. I was so very timid, and those 3 words just jumped out at me: presence, certainty, position. We get those, we draw on those from God. We don't have to nervously try to find it in some self-help book or in some person or some educational school. They come from God. And those words, I looked those words up in the 1828 dictionary. Presence, a calm, collected state of mind with its faculties at command. Certainty, full of assurance, exemption from doubt, a settled state. And position, the state of being placed, a proposition affirmed as a fixed principle. All of that gave me such a sense of peace. And when you think of presence of mind, and where does that come from? But being in the presence of God. All of these qualities come from His presence. And as I worked with that thought, that statement from this book, so much of my fears and my insecurities left, because I knew my insecurities were just based on this human sense of Mary. But when I knew as a child of God I had these qualities, and God is ever with us, those insecurities left. I'm so grateful to this church for Mrs. Eddy giving us our wonderful textbook, for this clear, correct explanation of Christian Science that goes to the bottom of all our problems and heals. So glad to be with you tonight.
Thank you.